That's nasty.
Welcome back, guys. Chuck Nasty on Fantasy Football here. It is the beginning of Week 11, so we are getting into the home stretch to get into playoffs in your league. You probably have a couple weeks left before you're able to get in there, so most people know whether or not they're going to get in or not. Hopefully, the defenses that we drop in today's video on streaming defenses will help a couple of you guys who aren't currently in the playoffs make it in, or at least get a couple of extra points. So we're going to recap some picks from last week. I'm going to go over some picks for this week as well as a couple of defenses to bench, and then some stashes for the fantasy playoffs. So the top pick this past week was the Indianapolis Colts. Slightly underperformed. We always pick the team that plays against the Miami Dolphins because they are absolutely ass this year, and it's basically free fantasy points. Well, 8 points this week from the Colts D. I mean, you're probably still pretty content with that. They didn't get as many sacks as I thought they were going to, and it is what it is. They put up a couple more points than I originally thought that they would this week. So the big piece with this projection, I think, is that there was a solid chance that Jacoby Brissett was going to play this week, and because he didn't, it kind of made it more difficult for the Colts to get anything rolling, which then in turn puts more pressure on their defense. So with Brian Hoyer under center, there's not a whole lot that you can do. But hopefully Jacoby Brissett will be back this week. The second pick this past week was the Ravens defense, who you are obviously very happy with, put up a whopping total of 24 points. Really excited about that. I own them in a couple of leagues. They held the Bengals to just 13 points against. And they had 2 defensive touchdowns, which is where most of those points came from. This was great. I hope you guys had a chance to pick up Baltimore. I know I ended up playing against them in one league. F you, Matt. But, it is what it is. It was good. It was a good day for the Baltimore Ravens. Great matchup. And that's what happens when you play against a rookie quarterback. It's obviously they're trying to see if they can replace Dalton or if they're going to need to draft somebody with their top 5 pick at QB this year. So we'll see. And then the last one was a swing and a miss. I probably own more shares of the New York Giants than any other of these defenses. Maybe the Colts I had more, but they stunk, man. It was terrible. And Sam Darnold had a rushing touchdown and a throwing touchdown within the first 5 minutes of the game. It was just atrocious. So the Jets scored 34 points against the Giants. They underperformed on projected sacks. They underperformed on interceptions with 0, and they scored a total of 1 point. So this is why fantasy is so frustrating. Most of you guys that have been watching these have played for a couple of years. But even when you have a sweet matchup and a team that's performed above and beyond the average threshold for sacks and interceptions can't get a week going when you need them to is just so unfortunate. But we're going to continue to play the odds. I'm going to give you some picks this week that we're going to go into so that you have some better options for Week 11. And then you can obviously pick them up tomorrow morning after your waiver clears at 3:30 in the morning. And hopefully it gives you an edge this week. So the top pick that I have this week is the Redskins. I like the Redskins defense because they play the Jets. Now, if we look back at last week, this doesn't look like a great offense to play against because they just put up 34 points against the Giants. But in the grand scheme of things, what we use to project these lines is we're using the Vegas over-under for total points, and then we find the implied point total for the team. So Vegas says that that Darnold and the Jets are only scoring 18 points this week, which is significantly better than 34, obviously allowing us to get some additional points on defense this week. And Darnold has been one of those guys who is semi-consistently throwing interceptions, has some issues with turnovers, and it should be a somewhat decent day for the Redskins defense. So if you don't have a great matchup on defense, this might be someone to pick up, or at least to monitor in case no one in your league picks them up. So they might be available tomorrow, and you might not even have to burn a waiver for them. The other pick that I have this week, I have 3 total. So the second one is the Oakland Raiders. I did not think very highly of the Raiders going into this year. And John Gruden has kind of proven otherwise, having a couple of unexpected victories, including one last week against the Chargers on Thursday Night Football. So the best part is they're playing against the Bengals, who have been absolutely atrocious on offense. If you drafted Joe Mixon this year, I'm so sorry for you. Probably should have watched one of my draft videos. Just kidding. But for real, like, Joe Mixon's been terrible. They can't get anything going. AJ Green's not back, and he said he was going to be back that fourth week of September. But Vegas says that they are scoring under 20 points this week against the Raiders. Now, the Raiders don't have a good defense, so I'm not saying, like, drop the 49ers D to go pick up the Raiders or anything crazy like that. But if you absolutely need a streamer, it's an upside matchup. Basically, there are a couple of projections for the Raiders to get additional sacks and potential interceptions depending on who's under center this week. So something to monitor. And then you guys picked up the Colts this past week. At least I did in a couple of leagues. They play the Jaguars. Now, I don't really know how this is going to go down this week because this is supposedly the return of Nick Foles. But it might be a positive week for him. I would probably take the two other options over the Colts because Vegas is saying that the Jaguars with Nick Foles back is going to score 21 points or so. So it's not the most positive matchup. You know, obviously the less points scored against the best. Foles looked pretty good until he got injured in that first game, but we really don't know what he's going to look like. So there's an unknown factor that goes into this week. But the Colts aren't above average in sacks or interceptions like that either as well. Foles tends to be one of the QBs that relies a little bit more on the safer pass options. He throws more towards the slot guys, so he's not throwing the deep ball, which gives you a higher opportunity of interceptions or anything crazy like that. So I would say you're probably looking, maybe slightly above average for the Colts this week, but nothing crazy. So other teams that you don't want to play this week, I am definitely not playing the Chicago Bears defense. I picked them up in one league when I had the Giants this past week, and ended up dropping the Bears D before they played the Lions, thinking that Matt Stafford was going to play. This was the day before. And then, of course, he gets ruled out. They play against a backup quarterback, and it's not as bad as it would have been. But they play the Rams this week, and Vegas is saying that the Rams are scoring 24 points. And Jared Goff has kind of been this streaky, inconsistent, where he has like a really big week. He throws 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then the week after that, he puts up less than 10 fantasy points. So I don't really think that it's going to be a great week to be the Bears defense. The Rams are a bit more of a stingy team on offense. And anytime McVay has an opportunity over a bye week to line up, week schedules at a time, He basically has a game plan for everything. So he obviously knew that the second week off a bye, they have the Bears, and they've been practicing for that. So not starting him this week at all. Probably better left on the bench this week. And I also told you that I was going to tell you a couple of picks for future playoffs for fantasy. If you're looking at the near term, so you're talking like week 12 and 13, the Browns play the Dolphins next week, which should be pretty solid. The Lions are against the Redskins, and then the Steelers get a divisional matchup with the Bengals. I'm not sure if any of those teams are available on your specific waivers, but looking forward further weeks, the Philadelphia Eagles are a team to monitor because they have some pretty sweet matchups. There's a couple of weeks in a row where they play the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Redskins in some division games. So just to consider if they're available. They were on bye this past week, so they might be hanging out on the waivers. But if there are any questions or anything like that you guys have, by all means, let me know. And I kind of had a little bit of a disclaimer in previous videos. I don't have a crystal ball. I obviously can only project based on what trends are telling me and look at good matchups versus bad matchups and play the probabilities. So I would say that my projections are more right than they're wrong, which, I guess that's a good thing. But in the grand scheme of things, I had a couple of people ask me if I can start putting up against the spread picks or projections for games. So I will look at doing that maybe on Thursday's video. I'm a little bit superstitious, especially if I'm betting games. I don't like to, televise what I think the score is going to be because I feel like it's bad juju. However, on Monday night's game, about I don't know, halfway through the first quarter, somebody had asked me what the score was going to be and if I could tweet out an update. And I said that I thought that the Seahawks were going to win by 3 points, as shown by this tweet right here. They did win by 3 points, and there was really no way that I could have known that besides my projections. So that's sort of where this came from. If you guys have any questions on specific games, whether or not I would take the spread, I'm more than happy to answer that as well. Make sure you drop that down in the comments, along with any roster questions you have. And good luck this week. Hopefully you get into the fantasy playoffs. Do me a favor, subscribe to the channel here. If you're not following me on Twitter, at ChuckNastyGG on Twitter, I tweet out a lot of stuff during the games. Sometimes it's just mass profanity in all caps because the players that I want to perform aren't doing well. But at the end of the day, you can ask me questions on Twitter. I try to be very interactive. And thank you guys very much for 250 subscribers. I didn't think when we started doing this 8 weeks ago that we would get to this point, and it's pretty awesome. So I think that we can really blow this up, and hopefully there are some more people that I can help with my fantasy knowledge. So good luck this week in Week 11, and as always, we'll see you soon.